Tonight's discussion is going to be regarding what's maybe a conflict that exists between certain themes and responsibilities that we have as individuals. We know, we believe, we have faith that the Almighty not only created the world, but is in charge and running the world. And, we're thankful to the Almighty when good things happen to Him, to us. We pray that good things ought to happen to us. We attribute our successes to the Almighty. We say, "Thank God things are well. Thank God I'm healthy. Thank God I have my livelihood. Thank God I have my family. Thank God I live in these United States." We thank God for all the things that we have, and we attribute the things that we have to Him as well. And I think that's obviously one of the core elements of Judaism, that you have faith. It's the first thing that we mention. It's the first of the Ten Commandments. It's the first thing Maimonides mentions. It's the core. That's what it's all about, right? That's the one true reality, is the reality of God. Everything else is a dependent reality. Everything else is a contingent reality. Nothing else has any individual value, because if God brings about everything, everything is thus dependent upon God, and God Himself is not dependent upon anything. Thus, there's only one true variable in the world, and that's God. Everything else is relative. So this is the core of our religion, I would say, very confidently, on one hand. On the other hand, we have a notion, and we have a duty to do things on our own, to be motivated, to be galvanized, to work hard, to put in the hours in every area of our lives. We tell our kids, you put in the efforts and you'll be successful in your life, in whatever way it is. It could be in relationships, it could be in your career, it could be in your business, it could be in your physique, your dieting, whatever it is. And when we're doing that, we're telling our kids, you do it and you'll be successful. You don't do it, you won't be successful. Well, what about God? So it seems, at first glance, we're going to try to tiptoe into this discussion slowly, that there's a conflict. On one hand, we have the Almighty's supervision on us, the Almighty's being in total control of everything that happens to us. On the other hand, we talk about our responsibility to do the most we can, our commitment that we have to have towards the effort and towards giving 100% that we should be successful. So which is it? And if it's one, is it one or is it the other? And I think that the conversation or the discussion can really have, there's a few different areas that we could talk about with regards to this core problem. I don't want to say problem. I think conflict is probably better. Or quagmire. I don't know. Which word's best? Either one's fine, right?
I don't see the issue.
You don't see the issue?
No, because we're in a partnership with God.
Okay, so let's don't jump to the answer already.
I'm not.
Okay, let's go.
That's what I'm saying. There's not a. I don't see the issue.
Well,
There's a partnership.
I do.
Okay.
God gives you the tools.
Are you warm?
Are you warm or is it me?
Or
We could have a little more air.
Let's see if,
I am
I don't know
sweating.
if this thing is on.
What's it say?
It's only like 100 degrees outside, so.
Schedule cooler, see what happens. Cool.
Just lower the temperature.
Okay, so thank you for the
Demonstration.
temperature
Yeah.
control, climate management. So let me introduce maybe perhaps maybe it's a simple question, maybe it's just over the top question, but maybe there's some truth to it. So when someone dies, when everyone's going to die, so it's unfortunate, it's sad, but everyone dies. We have certain things that we say, and there's a very famous verse that we read: Hashem nasan, Hashem lakach. The Almighty give, the Almighty takes away. He giveth and He taketh away, right? I don't know why I have to add the th at the end. He gives and He takes away. So what are we essentially declaring? The Almighty obviously gives the gift of life, and when He's done, He takes it. The Talmud says that there's three partners every man: the father, the mother, and God. The father gives X, mom gives Y, and the Almighty gives Z. And at the time of death, the Almighty says, I'll take what I'm going to give and I'll leave what your parents gave. But once again, the Almighty is controlling who's living and who's dying. So, now this is a little bit out there. So, I'm just trying to bring a point here. if the Almighty is going to decide when I'm going to die, does it make sense, or is it unreasonable for me to say I'm not going to wear a seatbelt while I drive, because if I get into an accident and I die because I didn't have a seatbelt, well, I would have died anyhow, because that's what God wanted me to die. Or I could, I don't know, do something really dangerous. I don't know, drive, in reverse. I'm not going to take it for that. Or walk into a highway and try to dodge the trucks. Is that crazy? If you believe that the Almighty is in charge of who lives and who dies, Mazel Tov. The Almighty is in charge. So if it's meant for me to die, it's meant for me to die anyhow. And if not, then I'll be in safe. I'll emerge safely. Is that a reasonable question? I think that it's a good roof. What do you guys think? I think most of us are putting our seatbelts on, right? Clicking our ticket. But I think there's at least room for discussion. It's like, let's assume we accept the principle, 1,000%, the Almighty is in control of life and death. We accept that. If we accept that, is it reasonable to say that we can act in a way that maybe, quote unquote, imperils our life, but it doesn't if the Almighty is in charge? Maybe we should be smoking. Maybe it's better for us.
Common sense.
Should we take a cigarette break?
God also gave us a brain.
Oh.
And that's where I'm saying the partnership is, He gave us the tools. And it's up to us to use those tools or not use those tools.
So let's break down what you're saying. You have a propensity to always jump to the conclusion. This is very good. But let's take this to the logical end, right? So what you're saying is that
It's not going to micromanage.
He's not going to micromanage.
Right.
But that's a very dangerous thing to say, because
Really
we
is
do
it
say
true?
that he
In
does
some ways
micromanage.
he does.
Right, he does.
Realize it a lot.
We find
Right.
statements in the Talmud that everything that happens, every single thing that happens to us is the Almighty's doing. So obviously the question is, I think essentially our discussion
Maybe
is
predestined too.
maybe, but then there's the argument of our actions are going to contribute. So the question is, where do these two meet? Like, where does on one hand, our brain, our intelligence, our common sense, where does what's the requirement that has on one hand? On the other hand, God's creating the arena for our life. And sometimes he does things that even, he takes people away in ways that they didn't, people are perfectly healthy, they exercise, and they die.
See, I look at that's what comes to my mind.
And then
You're talking about someone who's dangerous and does bad things. I can think of many people who do everything, quote, unquote, right, eat right, don't smoke, or healthy, and boom, they get sick, they get some hidden cancer that,
We just have a heart attack.
heart attack. So boom, it's not what we have control over.
So
Then you get the guy who flies the plane full of passengers into the
And
side of a
the
mountain
yeah.
because he decides to commit suicide and take 80 or 100 and whatever it was
People
with him.
Yeah.
They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He overrode anybody else's choice.
Yeah.
And I
They
don't
didn't
think
have
God
any
said,
God
okay, I'm
let
putting
God-
all of you in the plane at the same time to die. I'm going to take all of you now because I've decided and predestined that for all of you, including a baby and including, all kinds of ages and everything else, innocent people, because this person decided.
Well, I on one end, I think I agree with you, but I think I don't agree with you.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. Because I think that your argument is based upon the fact that there's the old people, there's young people, right? The Almighty could keep calculations, in a much grander scale than we can. So it's very possible, it's very likely that each one of those people, for whatever reason, they might have wanted their soul back, and we wouldn't know why. I happen to agree with you that you're right. I happen to agree with you. This is a subject of huge debate. I think it's tonight's debate, is that there is a possibility, and I think you're right, that the power of the individual and the choice that the individual makes, the free will, like you said, that can not only affect them, that affects other people as well. Think about it. If I choose to be a bad parent, who's going to suffer? The kid's going to suffer. Well, what do you mean? That's the leash that the Almighty gives us with our free will to do good to do bad, to do good for us and good for the world, and bad for us, bad for the world. So I think that there's two possibilities in that story. Obviously, it's tragic, and we have to discuss this sensitively, of course. But in an example like the case that you mentioned, it's possible that each one of those people, for whatever reason, the Almighty kind of got all these people together, and they all had to be off, so to speak. Off, that's a bad word.
Again, like I said,
That's be whacked.
your
Oh, it's bad.
partnership, but not all
That's even
partnerships.
worse.
It's even worse.
But not all partnerships are good.
Yeah. So, and we cannot fathom the extent of God's calculations and His plan for everyone.
No.
Of course. However, I think that there is legitimacy to the argument as well that it's possible for the pilot's free will to affect other people, even though they shouldn't have died. And he, with his actions, can affect others. We live in a world where there's free will interdependence.
But hey, see, let me tell you, like on 9/11,
That's
some
what I think.
people didn't go because for some reason God pulled them back and wouldn't.
And there's hundreds of stories like
Okay,
that.
that's what I'm saying. So obviously, everybody on that plane, God wanted to die because
That's
if
right.
He did not want them to die, He would have made them miss a plane. He would have had someone get sick or something like
There
that.
are so many stories like that.
I
Yeah, but
agree
that's
with you
what it
100%.
says.
That's what I
Yeah.
was
I'm
going
pretty
to say.
sure. I'm
Yeah.
pretty
They're
sure.
meant to be there.
I'm pretty sure
They were
Seth
meant to
MacFarlane.
die.
You know Seth MacFarlane?
No.
Yeah, that's a familiar name.
He's the guy from Family Guy.
Family Guy.
Oh.
He had a ticket on one of those planes. I'm pretty sure it was Seth MacFarlane, and he woke up late or something like that, and he.
So God didn't. It wasn't.
Yeah, but
His
there's
time.
that's a
Yeah,
famous
but that's
person.
it.
But there's I
Yes.
know myself of like
Stories you would
tens
know.
of stories,
But
tens
I'm
of
just
stories.
saying,
But is that
obvi-
rationalizing?
Well,
everybody
no, but I think that there's maybe room for both of these theories to be true. That go ahead.
Yeah, what I'm saying is God's going to take you when it's your time, and I believe everybody on that plane,
Was
it
their
was
time.
their time. I mean, we don't know the
But
reason
God
why.
didn't do it. The
Yeah, but
terrorists
God let
did.
them. God let them get on that plane. He could have prevented them. He could have gotten another flight. He could have prevented them from missing it. He wanted that to happen.
But there are
See, that
numerous
goes
times in
against free
our
will.
day, in our week, that God allows us,
Free
if you
will.
want to put it in those terms, to do things that maybe are not in our best interest. He allows us
Because of our
to
free
make
will.
mistakes. So why would He allow them to get on the plane?
Because it was their time to die.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
but
All
I
those
do
school,
that.
all
I
those
do.
school children, I can't.
Yeah.
I know.
But
I'm saying-
But they're-
okay, but
I
wait,
know it's
wait,
time
wait.
for their
But
soul
What
with-
if
to
the
go
four,
back.
the
We don't know
four,
why.
Time for their soul to go
What
back.
about the little
soldiers who were
baby?
just killed today in
Yeah.
Chattanooga?
Yeah, it was time.
Yeah.
In
Tennessee.
recruitment
Yes.
center.
Yeah,
Yeah.
recruitment center.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just
Some
missed
guy
what
drives
happened.
by,
So
Oh.
try and
From-
He's in two different.
and he's
two
from
different
born in
recruitment.
Kuwait.
He was
Shockingly.
born in Kuwait.
But went to
And
school in
shot for-
Chattanooga. The kid was
Yeah, he was.
educated in the
Yeah, he
United
was an
States.
Americanized.
But it
Yeah.
was
His
time.
parents-
Apparently not.
His
It was
parents
obviously
was,
time
yeah.
for them to go. We don't know why.
He was Americanized, but not up here.
I think that's the way
Yeah.
humans want to explain it. Because
But
it's
if
a
God's
very
in
spirit.
control, God wanted it was.
Well, maybe
Yeah,
not.
but remember, this is something very. I mean, I love this discussion
Exactly.
because you're both right, and I have evidence to both sides, which makes it a really knotty question.
Yeah.
It's not a cut and dried issue. If it was a cut and dried issue, we could just say cut and dried. It's El Mazel Tov. We could go home and start, I don't know, prepare for Shabbos, right? I have evidence to both sides. On one hand, we say, of course, the Almighty is gonna. There's countless examples in the Talmud. Like it says, if someone needs to die and another person needs to, the example the Talmud says, it says someone kills accidentally. So in this week's parsha, we read about someone who kills accidentally. They have to get a punishment. It's a minor punishment, but they have to get a punishment. If someone kills intentionally, then they have to be executed. Now, let's say someone killed intentionally, but there were no witnesses, so you can't execute him. And there was another person who killed accidentally, but there were also no witnesses. So the Talmud says that the Almighty is going to arrange that the guy who killed intentionally is laying down relaxing on a beach chair, and the guy who killed unintentionally is going to be climbing a ladder. He's going to miss a rung. He's going to fall down. He's going to kill the guy who killed intentionally, and the guy who killed unintentionally is going to be witnesses, and he'll have to go to the city of refuge and be punished as the guy who for the activity of killing unintentionally, and the guy who killed intentionally, he got executed. That's what the Talmud says. Now, I think it's important to realize that we don't know how many documented cases in history there are of people climbing ladders and all this working out perfectly. Specifically, ladder climbing. What if he didn't climb a ladder? What if he was driving a truck or something like that? We don't know. But clearly, the theme of that statement is that the Almighty will arrange all the chess pieces that people that need to get what they need to get will get it. Right. So that theory is for sure truth to that. On one hand, on the other hand, well, let's say the guy who well, let's qualify it here. Let's just say what we need to say if we want to say it, and that'll make sense if I say it. When I say it, hopefully. If not, will just stop me. Let's assume that what Monica is saying is entirely true all the way to the end, right? That it's not possible for me to kill someone who is innocent, or God doesn't want them right now. Then what would we need to say? If we say that, there's something else we need to say, and that is that anytime let's say someone's a murderer, any murder that happens, the victim had to have died. The victim had to have died anyhow. Is that right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's not his time.
That's right.
And if we're saying that my free will cannot encroach on someone else's free will, thus the free will of the murderer cannot encroach on the life of the victim, then it must be that the guy was dead meat anyhow. So that's a big insight. Anytime someone does, and then how do you blame the murderer? How do you blame the murderer? You killed innocent blood. No, he wasn't innocent. He was going to die anyhow. Monica told me.
No, but what about all those people that somebody was trying to kill and they were left for dead, but they survived it?
Okay.
Obviously, it wasn't their time. It's like, the person who did the murder needs to get in trouble, be punished because he wasn't supposed to do that because it says in the commandments, thou shalt not kill.
So you're very good. That's very good. So what Monica's saying, and I'll even bring you a source for that. Monica's saying, yes, the person needed to die, but you didn't need to kill him. Is that what you're saying? Right? Yes, the guy who was killed, they deserve to die. It was their time.
I didn't say they deserved to die.
Well,
I
God
said
wanted
it was their time.
God's time. Well, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Wait, before you go any further, wait, just stop. But sometimes, if this is your time,
yeah.
but you trip up and you're not right there at that particular.
Well,
then
the
you're not
argument
gonna die.
was that you
If
won't
it's
trip
the
up.
person, if the murderer is going to kill somebody in a dark alley, and that's his time, the victim's time,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter if he's in the back alley or over here. If he's not in the alley, he's not dead at the same time.
Yeah, but
it's not his time.
according to Monica, what will happen is the person won't trip up because the Almighty will make sure that the person's there in time to get to the dark alley.
How about this little curve on these stories of murder? How about where the murder is actually one of great torment?
What?
In other words, that person, let's say, person X, was destined to die.
Uh-huh.
And in the case is, it's going to be by the hands of this murderer here. But it's not as simple as that because some of these cases involve torture. Well, that's really
Yeah, where they, like
a
serial killers.
nasty of nasties.
Where we watch all these where they like to, they get a kick out of watching you
Suffer.
suffer.
So, yeah, well, how does one start to put that in the
But you love it, you want to lock your doors,
chemistry?
right?
Well, you don't have to be a crazy killer. Look at some of the atrocities
No,
done
but
by
but that's
by
what
military.
we're talking about, non-crazies.
No, people are people, and people have. There are many with a great deal of evil in them.
Correct. We accept that.
We have to have evil.
So,
But
Yeah,
we're
I
saying,
know,
but we're
that's
saying that
good,
God
but-
controls this to the point of saying this is going to be the end. But in between the person who actuates the killing or the murder, there's torture involved. Well, can we attribute that to God's will?
Well,
that's
we
pretty-
have to attribute, if we accept the original premise, we have to attribute both good things and bad things to God. So that's a very troubling thing to accept, but there's a lot of terrible
Well,
things,
especially to an innocent.
or to what we would consider as innocent.
Well, a child.
Okay, Rabbi, I'm
That's
gonna
right.
throw another little wrench in here with this.
Yes,
What about the whole
there's a whole bag of
reincarnation? The whole
wrenches.
reincarnation
Yeah, there's a lot
issue
of-
and the steps you have to go
Which,
through. in
which
order
by the
to-
way, would
know.
would perhaps help us with Barry's problem.
Absolutely. So,
That if the child has a previous life that they need to atone for, that idea has been proposed. I'm not trying to say
Yeah,
that. I'm trying to develop a discussion here. But I want to say another point, just to go back onto what Monica said, that we find in Genesis, the Almighty tells Abraham, "Your kids are going to be my kids, chosen people," right? The whole deal. But they're first going to spend 400 years in a foreign land, and then when they leave with great miracles and lots of money. Okay. Thus, it was predestined. This one's absolutely clear that the Jewish people are going to be tormented and enslaved for a long time. That already was told to Abraham.
But why would God let that happen?
Well, I gave an entire class on that. Why is it necessary? Why is that a necessary prerequisite for the Jewish people becoming the Jewish people? It's a very good question. Why is that? Because if you even look at, this is chapter 17 in Genesis, if you even look at the way it's described in the chapter, it makes it very clear that a condition of receiving the Torah and becoming the Jewish people, becoming the Jewish nation, is that you have to be a slave first. The question is why. It's a very good question. I gave a few classes on that recently. I love the question. It's a terrific question. I think I even did a video about it. Dave, did I do a video about that? Did I mention that in one of the videos? I might have mentioned in one of the videos that Dave asked the questions.
maybe, because we've talked about this somewhere.
Yes.
In some class,
Yes.
somewhere. Take so many of them. But,
So,
we've talked about it.
let me finish this point. So it says that they have to be enslaved, for sure. Now, what happens? They get enslaved. By who? By Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And what happens to Pharaoh and the Egyptians? They get vanquished. The question is, wait a minute, we're just doing the will of God. This is a clear case where we know for sure that it was predestined. Right? There's no argument that it's free will just can decide. It had to have happened. Right? Or did it? Well, it did. The Almighty says that it's going to happen. However, so why is Pharaoh punished? So that's the question that was asked. But one of the classical answers to this question is that, exactly what you're saying, Monica, that yes, the Jewish people needed to be enslaved, but Pharaoh didn't need to do it. Let someone else do it. The fact that you decided that you're going to be the one to enslave the Jewish people, that's what you're getting punished for. For your free will choice, even though the result is something that had to have happened anyhow. It wasn't about bringing out it wasn't that the result of enslaving the people, of marginalizing and tormenting the people. That's not what you're punished for. You're punished for your decision to do that, because you didn't need to do that. It had to happen, yes, but not by you necessarily. So that point is also a very incredible insight. Dave.
So your brother tells a story of a rabbi. Oh, this is right.
Go ahead. No, I was just.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Of a
well,
rabbi
hold on,
that-
hang on.
what you
Let me
just
ask
said.
a question before you go on. One quick clarification.
Go ahead.
So you're talking about the Pharaoh that, I'm sorry.
Enslaved.
Ramses?
Yes, when we fled Egypt. Ramses.
Well, we fled or were we enslaved? We were enslaved for a long time.
Ramses is the second.
So
it
what
seems-
Pharaoh are you saying?
Right.
Or
So
the whole lineage?
so it's important because the Torah does not.
Were they
does,
all tortured and all?
it seems like there
Yeah,
was. Yes.
Ramses
Not the
wouldn't let them
Levites.
go. Remember, Moses went
Yes,
there
but-
and said, "Let my people go," and he didn't want to let them go.
But the previous
Levites were
generations for 300-400 years wouldn't let him go either.
Right. So the
They
truth
could
is,
have freed him and said, you
there
know
were
what?
only
Yeah, I made a mistake. Go.
they were only enslaved for about 110 years. But prior to that, they weren't enslaved.
Something. Yeah.
Well, they were there for the entire time that they were in Israel was 210 years, but not all of it was enslaved. They started off with Joseph was there, etc. But as to the pharaohs, the Torah does not distinguish between the different pharaohs. I would assume over 110 years you have a few different pharaohs. I think it's a safe assumption that we can make. It seems likely that the policies didn't change. Even though the beginning of Exodus does talk about a new pharaoh, we don't know exactly, is it one new pharaoh, is there two new pharaohs, is it a new dynasty of pharaohs or a new regime of pharaohs, multiple pharaohs that had the same policies. Either way, it's the pharaoh of the,
but
yes.
The reference
Now
is
the term Ramses, we have no idea. We have no idea. The Torah does say that they built a city called Ramses that we know. So it's likely that it's one of those guys. We know that the Egyptian. We found the evidence that there was a guy named Ramses who was the pharaoh at that time, about 33 years ago. Huh?
You'll bring
Sorry? Who?
the movie.
He doesn't compute, he's too young.
Moses, the
You know,
Ten
the original
Commandments?
Ten Commandments.
Here's my
The
question,
original
Rabbi.
1956?
Here's my question.
Go ahead.
Can I ask it now?
Yes, no, thank you. Forgive me a few minutes.
Your brother tells a story of a man, of a rabbi, a real renowned rabbi, stopping at somebody's house, and the baby died, and the rabbi went
Right
and
after the
said,
bris. Right after the
marvelous,
bris.
that's great. Now,
Yeah.
how do you, what do you say to a parent? Do you tell a parent it was his time, and they're supposed to accept that?
So there's two questions that you asked. You asked one question and then another question, and this is the core point. I want to make this very clear. I gave an entire lecture. I think I gave 2 or 3 lectures on this issue. It's a very grave issue. Bad things happen to good people, and it's discussed so widely in Jewish writings. It's not like, this is a hard question beyond the scope of this discussion. That's not what we do in Judaism. We don't run away from hard questions. It's discussed at great length. But it's very important to realize there's 2 questions. And if you don't realize this point, then you cannot possibly proceed. When you asked, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why a terrible, tragic thing happens to innocent people? However you want to formalize that question is 2 questions. And one of them is an emotional question. And you said, well, what do you tell the parents? That's how you phrased it. That's an emotional question. If you are in the presence of tragedy, that's the only question you can ask. However, there's also a philosophical question, right? It's just, and the setting has to be right for the philosophical question. If you're sitting in a shiva house of a tragedy, you can't say, well, the Almighty wanted it to happen. That's the wrong approach, because you're not answering any questions. Because you're answering the wrong question, right? So that's why it's very important. You're asking me a question, and I want to know which question do you want answered.
I would like the one you just asked. How do you say
I asked 2 of them.
To me, I would like to know how you approach somebody and said it's your time to go.
I never said that. That's not the question. Like I said, the only setting for answering the philosophical question is outside a setting of tragedy. So I would never tell anyone why their kid has to die, their spouse has to die, something like that. So because you cannot have a deep philosophical, intense conversation in a shiva house. It doesn't work like that, right? What you would say is, we find in Abraham. Well, what happened with Abraham? Now, what do we know about Abraham? Spit out some things. What do we know about Abraham?
Kindness.
Binding of Isaac, kindness.
10 tests.
10 tests. What else?
From the Jewish people.
Father of Jewish people.
He left his
First
family.
monotheist.
First
his God
monotheist.
told him to.
Okay.
Yeah, he had 2 wives, he threw Hagar out.
Yeah.
Okay, so but Abraham, we know, was a giant intellectual. He was a giant intellectual. In fact, who knows? He might have been the greatest innovator, a philosopher, a theologian of all time. It's very likely, and I would make the argument, and I would defend this, that he impacted the world more than any single individual. Abraham, we know, would go and have debates. Abraham was a polemic. Abraham was a titanic individual, intellectually. As we know, he developed our entire theology, right, on his own, with his own intelligence in a world that totally rejected that. And now, thousands of years later, the entire world has essentially accepted the Abrahamic ideology. Now, Abraham...
But it wasn't on his own. He was in partnership with God.
Well, no, he didn't have prophecy until he was 75.
Well,
You didn't what?
God
He
was
didn't
there.
have prophecy.
But God was there.
Well, true,
So
of course.
You're in
Of course.
partnership.
Means that's true. Of course, you can't
and he
live.
got the brain from God.
Of course,
So,
of
God gave
course.
him-
But
so-
he had the free will to make
Yes,
those choices,
exactly.
and he had the capacity as well.
Exactly.
Now,
where do you
Abraham's
get that
wife died tragically at the age of, who knows,
100?
127. Now, if someone's wife dies at the age of 27, you'll say that was a life good lived, right? Yeah, you kind of maximize it. 127, probably the oldest person around nowadays, right? No, there's no reason to cry, right? Now, if you think about Abraham, not only is his wife 127 when she dies, but Abraham is also the most intelligent of all men. He's the most intelligent man around. He's the most rational person around. Therefore, you would think that his approach to it would be rational. You say, well, we know the reasons why God takes people away. We know God's in control. Abraham had perfect faith. He knew that God was in control. He knows that the Almighty gives, the Almighty takes away. How did Abraham mark the death of his wife? With eulogy
He mourned her.
and with
Yeah.
crying
Crying,
and with
crying,
mourning.
yeah.
What are you crying for? What's this? What's the tragedy? Your wife was only 7 years old. You understand more than anyone else why she had to die. You understand that it was a time. The answer is that even Abraham, who is the great intelligent, who is the great faith, and even though his wife was 127, that is still not a setting for a philosophical debate. That is a place for crying, for mourning, for eulogy. Why? Because in an emotional setting, only the emotional response is taken. Right? And that's why, and even Abraham, it's a legitimate question, and that's the response. And you look at the Jewish laws of mourning, what does it say? It talks about addressing it emotionally. We do not believe in just, our philosophy mandates that we accept the emotional side of the coin. However, if you, and if you were to ask me in a arena that's entirely devoid of any emotional tendencies, if we could isolate just the philosophical approach, then we have a lot to talk about. Because philosophically, there's a lot out there. Right? Someone mentioned the idea of reincarnation. Bless you. There is many sources in Jewish writings that discuss the issue at great length. And there's different approaches, and there's like themes in the approaches. There's a lot out there, a lot of material out there. And I would highly suggest, if you want to hear more about it, to go to my website and to find, what would you put in the search bar? You would, why bad things happen to good people.
Reincarnation or something like
No,
that?
don't put reincarnation.
Not that.
Why bad things happen to good people.
Oh,
Just put
okay.
that in. And I gave a whole bunch of talks about it. Yes, that's why it's very important. But this is the most important thing. When we're talking about something like that, a tragedy, it's two questions. And no matter who you are, no matter how great you are, if this is an arena of tragedy, we only address the emotional issue. Where were we? Who remembers? I think we're talking about...
Partnership with Bill.
So, I have some more questions here that I think we should discuss.
Well, we were talking about that whole issue. See, the whole issue
Yes.
of free will is a very difficult thing to understand, I think. I think it's hard. Yeah. It's very hard to understand that. Really, I mean, it's really hard to grasp
Within the
it
context.
because
Within the context
because
of-
God knows what's going to happen, but yet we have free will. It's very. I think it is.
I think it's a
am I-
power. I think it's a great parallel to the discussion we're having today.
Yeah.
It's that free will, our decisions on one hand. On the other hand, the Almighty's plan for us. I think that's why, and it's a very there's a thin line between the two sides.
So if everything is predestined or predetermined for us, then we have no free will.
And-
We
and-
have
and
free
the
will
problem with that-
within, I suppose, within this circle, but everything's, no matter what we
just
do.
Think, you just think
it-
you have free will.
Right.
Right, but there's a big problem.
Your brother said
Don't
this.
worry. First of all, don't blame my brother.
No,
Don't
no,
blame me for all the things my brother
No,
says.
your brother said this because we asked him about that. He said, like on a chess game, God knows you and He knows what moves you're going to make.
But you move the chess players.
But He knows.
You
But
move
He
chess
knows
players.
what you're going to do.
Yeah, right.
That's
Maybe
that's-
you could
no.
expand that
Because
to
you
say,
don't know what He knows. We don't know what
Yeah,
God
he
knows.
He knows your
So
personality,
we're doing.
and He knows what you're going to do.
maybe you
yeah.
could expand the concept to say we have free will, but we're always playing on God's chessboard. So that free will, like someone started to allude to earlier, is still boxed up to a point at which you're controlled. You can move, jump once and take a right twice, but you know what? That's all you're allowed to do. Or maybe you could go right and left. But God is giving us this playing field, and you are playing over there, mine is over here, and really that's our limitation, maybe.
Well,
Maybe.
it's like this, we know each other. We know what each other would do in certain situations, how you would react, and God knows more than anybody how you're going to do. Maybe that's
That's what you're.
Well, that's what I'm saying, there's limitations.
Yeah, I think
even to
there's
the free will
listen.
issue.
These two discussions are very much linked together, and I think that the conversation we're having tonight is an easier one to really talk about. I have a lot to say on the issue. I really do about free will. What I'll tell you is that Maimonides. Well, we'll never get through this, but okay. I gave up. I have 6.5 pages of sources, by the way. It's not going to happen. I'll just accept that. What Maimonides tells us in that philosophical question is that essentially our understanding of the question is the reason why we have the question. Now, what that means is that we are working within a framework. And that framework is, what's that? Our own mind. We cannot imagine things that are unimaginable, right? For example, you want to imagine, try to imagine putting the elephant through the pinhole, right, without making the elephant smaller or the pinhole bigger. Could you imagine that? No, why not? Because this is too big, right? It's not possible, right? You cannot conjure. You have no idea. You right, because there's limitations there. You know, can you imagine existing today and yesterday and tomorrow simultaneously? No, we can't imagine that because we exist now, and then as time passes by, or as we pass through time, that's it. Whatever we did is gone, and whatever we're going to do, we haven't yet even met. We have no idea what's going to happen on the drive home. We can't imagine what's that. We'll get there, when the time comes. Right. And those are the restrictions of our perception. Right? That's the way we're designed. We're designed to have these limitations in understanding. The fact that we believe, if you accept the definition of the Jewish God, you believe that God does not have those limitations. And therefore, God simultaneously exists outside of time, thus exists as much as he does today, he exists simultaneously yesterday and tomorrow and 100 million years ago and 100 million years from now. For us to understand that, we cannot possibly do it. Right? You got to break the mold and start from scratch because the human mind cannot grasp that reality. So essentially, our question is only valid when we put God and bring him down to our level. And we say, well, God, in a linear way, God knows what I'm going to do, so I got to do it. The question is really only valid once we anthropomorphize God. Right? When you accept the Jewish definition of God, that God is not in time and in space. He's not in the same realm. We're parallel existence, so to speak. Of course, we're dependent on God, obviously. But it's not the same reality, it's not the same rules, then the question, there's no overlap between what God knows and what I do. Well, they're on different planes entirely. That's essentially Maimonides' answer. So I think that the chessboard answer is a very good answer. I'm not contesting its validity. But the real naughty philosophical answer is what Maimonides writes, which essentially he's telling us, listen, you cannot understand because you're human. But you can understand that you don't understand. You can understand the limitations of your own mind. Let us.
Living in a parallel universe.
Oh, I didn't say that.
No,
It's
you're
parallel
putting it in
realities. Parallel
Again,
realities.
it's like
not a
trying
parallel
people who say, my parrot can talk. The parrot isn't talking, but it's mimicking. We're trying to understand something that is not in our realm. We can only put it in words in our
We have definitions.
that we have definitions.
These.
That's
By the way,
what
who
I
came
said
up with these
earlier.
definitions?
I'm going here. Yes, Rabbi. It's what I've tried
Abraham.
to put in words. What you're saying is exactly. We try to explain it, but our explanation is very limited.
Means we cannot be at peace with it because the only way for it to
we
accept
don't
it.
understand.
Exactly.
God is working in a way that is, it's like somebody from the caveman trying to understand a cell phone. It's like.
But it's even more than that.
But it's much more. But it's just the gap is I don't want to say insurmountable, but it is not understandable. It gives us comfort. We try to put it in words.
Like I said,
comfort us.
it's different rules.
Yeah, but then every defense in a courtroom would be, God predestined that. That's what I was going to do.
But who said that? No one said that.
Well, I'm just saying, though.
No. But according to what
I
Maimonides
robbed
is
the
saying,
bank because
according
I
to
was
what
predestined to rob this bank.
according to what Maimonides is saying, it says that the Almighty's pre-knowledge of what you did. No one said predestined, pre-knowledge. No one ever says that, by the way. The question is when we assume that pre-knowledge, right?
Is that different?
No, destined determines the same thing. Means it's destined to happen or it's determined to happen, deterministic. I think it means the semantics of it is I don't think it's that important. But either way, the fact that the Almighty knows doesn't mean that it has to happen. Why? Because the Almighty knows on His level, and we make decisions on our level. They're not on the same level. So essentially, if someone does commit the murder, he did it. He chose to do it, and he's guilty, and he should be punished for it. The fact that the Almighty has pre-knowledge of that, so what? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's predestined. Why? Because predestined means that I had to do it, and the Almighty knows it's on His realm. The fact that I chose to do it, the fact that the Almighty knew what I was going to choose, well, that's because the Almighty exists outside of time.
Right. We don't know what God knows.
It's like if the fact that I don't know the guy shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand 100 years ago. Like, we know he did it, so he had no free will. Is that what you're going to say? No, of course not. Because the fact that we know it, because we know it.
Well,
That doesn't mean that he had no free will. Right? Because we're existing now post facto. We're existing in a different realm. Right? On the day of, well, then he had free will, right? You would have had free will.
Yeah.
But we know that he did it. So he didn't have free will. Because, we exist after the fact.
It's
He
like
had
on
free will, and we
Oedipus-
exist after the fact.
It's like on Oedipus Rex. Okay, the Greek tragedy where it was predestined that this baby is going to kill the father and marry his mother. And well, the king said, no, I want you to kill the baby. That's not going to happen. He's not going to marry my wife. Well, anyway, the huntsman didn't kill him or whatever didn't kill him. He ended up killing his father, over some kind of a bridge and ended up marrying the mother. It happened, and they tried everything to make sure it didn't happen, but
No,
it
but
happened.
he's just saying God has pre-knowledge.
No, but I'm just saying that, like in the Oedipus Rex, I'm giving you an example on like what had happened with Oedipus Rex, where the soothsayer said this was going to happen.
And by the way, what you're saying is another one of the answers is very similar to what Monarch is saying. Another answer, not Maimonides' answer, but the Riva's answer to this question is that he says he actually uses the words that God's knowledge is not complete. Thus, God knows, but it's kind of like knowing in like fortune telling, which to me that's a much harder thing to say. I don't know.
I haven't heard that.
Yes, he's like just like the stargazers can tell somewhat in a murky fashion what's going to be in the future. That's what he says. That's a very problematic statement.
For sure, if you believe in God.
It's
all
very, very
powerful,
hard.
all knowledgeable.
It's a very hard, and it seems likely from the context that he's only saying it to try to get rid of people. I mean, he's not, to get rid of people that say, he's essentially saying it for the non-intellectuals. That's what he's doing. He's saying for the non-intellectuals amongst us, this is the answer, and just okay, the man doesn't know perfectly fine. It's clear from his preamble. He has a little rant on it, and he's like, well, why does Maimonides need to bring this up? All the people that read, because he writes a rebuttal to Maimonides by saying, why do you have to answer the question? You asked the question, you didn't give a clear answer because he's telling you that you don't know what you don't know, right? And he's like, why? Now everyone's going to read it and say, well, there's a question, but there's no answer. You know what? So he says he gives his answer of stargazing. So I think it's clear from the context that he's giving the answer because he's worried people will read it and think that, there's no answer. So he's giving them an answer they could understand, even though it's nonsense.
Who was it, Rabbi, that gave that answer?
The Ravid. He is very enormously significant scholar of the Middle Ages, and he writes rebuttals on Maimonides. So if you open up the book, open the book of Maimonides, you read Maimonides on the side, you have a little note. Says Rabbi Avram, this is nonsense. He goes on and on and on and on. He was very sharp, very, very sharp. And in all his writings, he didn't like. He was like he didn't like when people when he didn't like what you said. He came after you. I remember once reading. This was funny. I remember reading he asked a question. Maimonides writes a law, whatever. Was law talking about the lost items. I don't remember what the exactly the law was. And he asked a question. He's like, and the words of this author, they have no spice and no flavor. And then all the later commentaries that explain what Maimonides says, right? And when they all write their answer and they explain what Maimonides says and they answer the Ravid's question, they say, by the way, you should know that the stew of Maimonides is not lacking not spice and not flavor. That's like their punchline.
So, Rabbi, we're supposed to love God, fear God, try to connect with God. I don't think we're supposed to figure out what plane he's on.
Yes, but that's part of defining God. Maimonides makes it very clear that this philosophical gap of what we can define, yet we cannot be at ease with, because we're defining it in a way that is limiting our understanding of the issue. So I think that there's this sweet spot where we say, yes, we know that God knows, yet we don't know how he knows it, how he exists outside of this time. But the fact that he knows, that doesn't infringe upon our activity, because our activity is on a different realm. And the example that I said, I'll ask you a question, I'll ask you a question again, right? If we know that Franz Ferdinand was killed, once we know that, then there's no free will. We know it. Well, yes, but the question is, the fact that we know it because we exist in a different time capsule than that person, of course we know. If the Almighty exists in the future as well, of course he knows. How does that affect our free will? It doesn't. That's the thing. It only affects our will if we're able to cross over into God's reality, and we can't.
Right.
It's a complicated answer, but
But didn't you,
we
okay,
can't know what
but
God knows.
back up ahead, because
Go
didn't
ahead.
you say then that God is, that our lives are predetermined, predestined?
no. Because remember, it's very important to realize here, what are the ramifications of that conclusion? Let's assume, for example, and this is not true, but let's assume, for example, that our lives are predetermined. What does that mean? So first of all, it means
that
like
God has determined what we're going to be, how rich, how
Every
poor,
action.
what, right?
every action, and we had no choice in the matter. The problem with that is, one of the problems is, first of all, is that, well, then no one could be punished for anything that they did. The most heinous crimes, Bill said, most heinous crimes, it's just God doing. Right? On number one. Number two, we know that we do have free will, and there's ample evidence to the fact that we have free will, that we have competing. First of all, everyone feels it amongst themselves. We don't even need to. Everyone knows themselves that they have free will. But even that aside, we have there's abundant evidence the fact that we are being guided by multiple forces. You know, anyone who tries to die knows that they have free will. They know what it's like. You're standing in the cupboard, and you have to make a choice, and you're being pulled in so many different ways. Primarily into candy or say no. If we're predetermined, we shouldn't have that conflict. That conflict can only exist because we have free choice. Additionally, in a more broader sense, let's assume we don't have free will. Let's say it's all predetermined. Well, what does that mean about our lives? I mean, our lives are purposeless.
I was just going to say, you
Right?
do nothing.
Right.
We're
You're not
purposeless.
doing nothing.
So no
But-
greatness
but-
is celebrated.
Right.
God gives us the money, as much or little. Some of us are rich, some of us are comfortable, some of us are poor. That's not our doing.
You don't think so?
That
But who
is-
said
Oh,
who
if
said
that
so?
would be the truth,
But who said so?
Wow.
yeah, we'd all sit here and somebody would delve out
Well,
the
we
money.
have to do our part.
So
So that's our
no
question.
matter
Very
what
well.
we do,
So that's exactly our question
put
tonight.
in all or nothing, God has determined how much we will get.
But who says that's right?
But you have to do your effort.
You have to do your
But we're
part.
told
That's
that
Okay,
we're
okay,
shut.
see,
Rabbi, we're told that.
okay, so
It's
let's bring the
determined for the next
sources.
year, right?
I'm going to
Yeah.
bring the sources. You ready, guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's start with the Talmud. I'll give you two Talmuds. Now, it's important that people who wrote the Talmud, these are the same people. And if anyone has actually ever studied the Talmud, you would come very, very quickly to realize that these are the most intelligent people you ever meet. And, and they're not going to make a clear mistake, especially not in the same book. 63 books of the Talmud, the odds of them making a mistake that is so dramatic as the one that is apparently the one I'm going to present to you is impossible. And I'll quote. Ready? This is from the Talmud in the book of Nida, in page 16b. And it says as follows. And you're going to like this one. Ready? You're going to like this one. The angel who's in charge of conception, the angel's name is Lila. So far, so good. Lila.
Lila?
Yeah, Lila's the Hebrew word for night. Okay. That's his name. Great. I'm not judging him by his name yet. And what does this angel do? He takes a drop. No, the drop is a drop of semen. And he brings it to the Almighty. And he asks the Almighty, what will be with this drop? What will be with this drop? What does that mean? Will this drop be mighty, will be strong, or feeble or weak? Wealthy or poor? Wise, intelligent, or foolish? However, righteous or wicked is not declared. And from here concludes the Talmud. From here we see all is in the hands of heaven, aside from fear of heaven. Thus, what's predetermined? How much money you'll have, wealthy and poor, how strong you'll be, physical and intellectual. Essentially everything. Material, physical, intellectual. All of the circumstances of our lives. Okay? Hold up thought. The Talmud in Nida 70b, a mere, 54 pages later, asks the following question. What should a person do to become wealthy? What does a person do? And he uses the same exact word for wealthy. He can't say, well, there's a different kind of wealthy. What does a person do and become wealthy?
Do to become wealthy?
Yes.
Okay.
And gives you an answer.
But it's predetermined, right?
But I don't know what's the deal. It's predetermined. Is it predetermined or not? I'll tell you what the answer is first. We get some financial advice here on the table. What does a person do? He should increase in commerce and do business with integrity. Formula. Do a lot of business. Right? Don't waste your time. Right? A lot of business and do business with integrity. Says the Talmud. Wait a minute. Many people try this and it didn't work for them. A lot of people hustling. Trying, and that doesn't work for them. And they do it with integrity. Rather, says the Talmud, it's not that. He should ask from he to whom the wealth belongs. And who's that? That's the Almighty. And how do we know that? The verse says, right, Liat kesef v'liat zav num Hashem. For is the silver and the gold to God. God is like silver and gold. So pray. So says the Talmud, if it's about prayer, why are you telling me about increase in commerce and do business with integrity? Just pray. Why don't you give me the answer straight up? Talmud says, ha b'lai ha efshar. One without the other is not possible. You got to do both. You got to do the prayer, and you got to do business with integrity, lots of commerce. Now let me ask you a question. If someone, when the angel's name is Lila, takes the drop and says, will this person be wealthy or will this person be poor? Some people says wealthy, some less wealthy, comfortable, poor, right? Everyone's given a certain label. Great. Let's say the guy was given a label poor. Or wealthy. Right? That's what the person's going to be. It's all is in the hands of heaven. Fair enough. Why are we saying, what does the person need to do to become wealthy? You know what you need to do? You got to convince Lila or convince the Almighty. It's too late. It's predetermined. Is it predetermined or is it not predetermined? Or is there a formula? Well, which one is it? They seem to both be true. But how could they both be true? This is why our discussion is an important discussion. They're both Talmuds. They're both in the same book. There is no way that this is a mistake in the Talmud itself. There's no way. So it seems that on one hand, it's predetermined. On the other hand, it's in our hands. So what's the deal? Which one is it? Is it both? How could it be both?
Sounds like nobody knows anything.
What is it? One of the little things in our prayer book I like. Pray like everything depends on God. Act like everything depends on you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the commentaries, he asked the question. See, we're not the only ones to ask the question. Yeah. And the answer that he gives is that, you know what? There's some people that the angel came and said, this kid's wealthy, and that's it. And I met some people that they're not so sharp. You have no idea like how they're good. I'm sure you meet people in business. They're like, how did this guy make any money? Goodness gracious. And it's just that the Almighty said they'll be wealthy. But some people might say they'll be poor. Maybe even dirt poor. And you know what? For those people, what do you do to become wealthy? You can change your lot, so to speak. Yes, there is a default status. If you don't do anything, or if you do minimal, you won't get there. But if you do something, it's in your hands. And what does a person need to do to become wealthy? There's a formula. All you got to do is do a lot of commerce, do business with integrity, and pray. Right? And even if your lot was originally, when the angel took the drop and said, what is going to be you poor, even though if it said that, you could change that. Thus, essentially what he's doing is bridging these two realities. Yes, of course, there is this idea of God controlling, predestining, giving us the influence, right? Creating the arena for our decisions, for our life, for the circumstances of who we are and what happens to us. Of course. On the other hand, our actions matter. We can choose good or bad to improve or make worse with the cards that we're dealt with. So I think that this example kind of gives us somewhat of an insight to what could potentially be the answer to the big issue at large. I want to quickly give a few more examples here because I think this is. I have at least another class in this. We're not even halfway, and I want to just give out some more food for thought here because I think it's the discussion is more important than the conclusion. We find in the book of Genesis a story about Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers, and he was sold to a fellow by the name of Potiphar, and then a fellow by the name of Potiphar's wife, she came to try to seduce him, and he eventually was accused falsely of trying to seduce her, and he was thrown into jail, where he languished for a long time. And then, coincidentally, or not coincidentally, right, he gets two cellmates. And who are they? The cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh. And what happens? And they're there for a while, they have the dreams, and he predicts the dreams correctly. And at the end, you know what he tells them? As the cupbearer is about to go back, he tells them, do me a favor. Remember me. Go back to Pharaoh and tell him I was falsely accused. I helped you here. I gave you this prediction. You see, I got something. You know me. You know I'm a decent guy. Remember me. And then the very next verse says it was 2 years later when then Pharaoh had his dreams. Pharaoh has his dreams and he sees the 7 cows and the 7 fat cows and 7 thin cows and 7 stalks of grain, right? And eventually Joseph is ushered out. Now, the juxtaposition of these two verses, Joseph says, remember me, and then 2 years later is pointed out by all the commentaries and the Talmud as well, that the reason why Joseph had to have 2 more years of incarceration was because he relied on the cupbearer. Instead of relying on God, exactly. Right? And he was punished for 2 years of incarceration, with 2 more years.
On the who?
On the cupbearer, the butler.
Okay.
Pharaoh's butler, who was his cellmate. What's the deal? So you're not supposed to do what you're supposed to do. On one now, this seems to be pulling us towards the other side. Everything is rely on God and don't even do anything for it. Well, how does that work? Just another more food for thought. I have an answer, by the way, to all of this, but I don't want to. I'll say one more Mishnah and then we'll stop. This is a Mishnah in the end of the book of Sota. Sota is the book of the Talmud. One of the 62 books of the Talmud talk about what's the case, what happens with adultery, what happens in an instance of adultery. And at the end, it gives a discussion about what changed when the temple was destroyed. It has a whole discussion at the end, towards the end of the book. What happens when the temple was destroyed? What happened when the temple was destroyed? Like, what were the various degradations in the status of the Jewish people at that time? So it says, amongst other things, it says, when the temple was destroyed, men of faith disappeared. It means people don't have faith. Since the temple was destroyed, there's no such a thing as men of faith. But when the temple was around, we were the Jewish people, we had people of faith. And now, post facto, the temple's destroyed and we no longer have people of faith. What does it mean to be a person of faith? So ask the Talmud, what does it mean a person of faith? Says Rabbi Yitzchak, the Rabbi Yitzchak says, this is referring to people who believe in the Almighty. Okay. As it is written in the Brisa, the quotes of Brisa, or Belezer the Great says, he who has bread in his basket and says, what will I eat tomorrow? Behold, he is from the men of limited faith. So if you have bread in your basket today, and you say, what am I going to eat tomorrow? You are not a man of faith. If you have one meal, that's it. You have $9 left in your bank account, and you're worried about what's going to be tomorrow, you're not a man of faith. Now, what does it tell us? That if you were a true man of faith, you don't worry about what's going to be tomorrow. Additionally, this is a little secret. What else does it tell us? What else does it tell us? If you're a man of faith, you wouldn't worry about what's going to be tomorrow. You have bread in your basket. Don't think about tomorrow. What else does it tell us? This statement. Shall I read it again?
You shouldn't invest in your 401k.
No, it's not. No, it's interesting when you say that. It's not. This Talmud does not seem to be instructive. Right? Where's the instruction? It's telling us a story. It tells us when the temple was destroyed, this and this happened. You seem to be pulling a lesson. It doesn't say, according to my interpretation, it doesn't say when you have bread in your basket today, don't say what should eat tomorrow. That's not what it says. It says the definition of a man of faith that existed in the temple times is someone who had bread in his basket and wouldn't worry about tomorrow. That's what it says. It's not instructive.
Somebody's going to provide for you tomorrow.
That's true, but for the man of faith.
Well,
For the
yeah,
man of
for the
faith.
man of faith.
Yes.
That's right.
Man of faith.
Now, what else does it
Stay
tell
in
us?
the moment.
Huh?
Well, it
You
doesn't
stay
seem,
in the moment, just today.
he's in the, right.
Who? For
But the-
who?
For the man of faith is all that counts is
Today,
where I
this
am.
moment.
And what is? But what else do we learn from that? There's a very crucial point here.
Appreciation for what you have now.
Well, but not it.
God's going to
It's,
provide.
there's no planning here.
There's no planning.
No.
Yeah.
Where's your
If he's
financial
got
planning?
bread in if he's got bread in his basket and he's worried about tomorrow, you have this right now. Is he going to eat the whole thing now and then what's going to happen tomorrow and have nothing?
He may not be there tomorrow.
But he doesn't. But
It
you
may be
can't.
his time may be up.
There's a crucial takeaway from this Talmud, and I think the takeaway is it's a little hard to see, but when I say it, I think it'll be very clear. What it's also telling us is that kind of person is no longer. Right? No longer is there someone who's like that. Thus, if you were to ask me, if I have bread today, should I worry about tomorrow or not? The answer is abso-freaking-lutely. Because the temple's not around, men of faith don't exist. I'm not a man of faith in the way it's described. I have to worry about tomorrow. What am I, a lunatic? I'm not going to tomorrow? I can't don't do the 401k?
There's
Of
a lot
course.
people who don't.
Yeah, but not out of
Majority
faith.
don't.
But not out of faith. Just out of negligence.
At his stupidity, yeah.
What it's telling us is that, yes, there might be this idea of just relying entirely on the Almighty. There is this idea, but that's not for us. That's for men of faith. Those are men of faith, the great titans that existed 2,000 years ago. Times of the temple. The temple was destroyed. The level of the nation spiritually regressed. Now we have no longer have men of faith. Now we have to worry about tomorrow. You better worry about tomorrow. Of course you better worry tomorrow. What are you feed your kids tomorrow? Right? That is the proper approach. So I think this adds another wrinkle to the discussion. It means we were looking at this, what does the Almighty expect of us? It seems like there's this possibility that every individual is treated as individual. So your level of faith and my level of faith and every one of us here, our level of faith, where we are as individuals, that is where the 2 points shall meet. For Joseph, to him, to even open his mouth and say, remember me, that was against faith. He was a man of faith. He had bread today. He had a hope. He should know that I don't take care of you. You don't have to try to act at it. You don't have to try to look for bread for tomorrow. Right? That's what's demanded of Joseph, the great man of faith of yesteryear. For us, if you were in Joseph's situation, you had better make sure that's the right thing for you to do, right? And that is your responsibility. Right? We no longer can live up to those standards. So the other wrinkle in this discussion is that who we are matters. So the level that's required of Moses and Joseph in this particular area is not what's demanded of us. And I think it's that blows open the whole discussion. We have to say, okay, who are we talking about? And that's why it's not a cut and dried issue for more reasons. There's legitimacy on both sides of the argument, and who the person is greatly should alter how exactly they reconcile this issue.
Isn't that why Moses gets the worst treatment in the Torah out of anybody?
Seems very interesting, right?
Well, right.
If you read the Torah, you'd say Moses is the villain. He gets rebuked more than anyone else.
Expected of him than us.
Yeah.
Exactly. What happens when
So
Moses?
he was judged more harshly by.
Much more. What happens when Moses hits the rock? What does God tell him? We read it.
You're
We
not
read it.
going to the
You're supposed to speak to.
Few weeks
you're not
ago.
going to the promised land.
No, he tells him much more. He says, "You have no faith." What? Moses has no faith? For Moses, at his level, that was an activity that was against his level of faith. For us, it would be the greatest act of faith we could possibly do. If I told you hit a rock and water's going to come out of it, and you actually did it, you have entire faith, right? If God told us, right?
It made believers out of all.
You would still do it, right? Whoa! He's actually doing it. What faith? For Moses, that's God tells him you have no faith. For Moses, there's no faith. For us, that would be the greatest act of faith we can ever imagine. So as I say, it's a very interesting discussion. I think there's more room to discuss if I get invited back.
Well, you'll be back.
You'll be back.
Okay, I hope so. Maybe we'll talk about it
Unless you're
further.
gone all next month,
It's
I'm
a
sure
very
we'll
very fun discussion.
Maybe
I
we could
think.
continue with that.
Yes,
Continue this
sure.
class next time.
Sure, but I think there's the discussions out there. I think it's that even if we don't do part 2, we still have a lot to think about and churn over in our mind. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you.
Lots of fun as usual, and everyone have a wonderful Shabbos.
You too.
And thank you for the climate management. It was great. I got worked up a little bit, but